Corruption Day. The UN Secretary General António Guterres is urging people everywhere to continue to work on innovative solutions to win the battle against corruption and ensure that precious resources serve the people of the world. It's estimated that globally $1 trillion is paid in bribes and $2.6 trillion is stolen annually through corruption. South Africa has been facing this scourge too, and to tell us a little bit more, I'm now joined by the Executive Director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis. David, thanks very much indeed. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, Peter.
So, I mean, the trillions that we're talking about, it's a global problem. It's gone on for centuries. But when we bring it home and we hear the revelations at things like state capture, a lot of people have been kind of gobsmacked at the levels that we had reached in this country. I wonder, from where you've been observing, have we maybe hit the bottom and things have started to turn for the better?
You know, I think so. Today is actually particularly significant for South Africans. If you remember, it was 4 years ago on this day that Nhlanhla Nene was fired.
Wow.
And replaced by somebody who we all unaffectionately know as the Weekend Special. And that was, I thought, and I think a lot of people thought at the time, the beginning of the end of the corrupt Zuma administration, and it was. I mean, we went through, a lot of stuff went through the sewers before he was ultimately removed, and a lot of stuff is still going through the sewers. Institutions have been very, very badly damaged. I mean, much more damaged than I think any of us could have predicted. There is still a corrupt faction within the governing party. There's no doubt about that, that restrains the president. But I do think that we have an administration whose leadership, at least in the state, is committed to fighting corruption, and quite a lot has been achieved in the last 2 years. The new heads of the NPA, SARS, other places, new institutions. But the public are impatient, and understandably so, and what they want to see are prominent people getting investigated, prosecuted, and imprisoned. And there are sort of signs that even that is starting to happen. You know, the Bongo arrest, the former mayor of Durban. These might not be household names, but they're quite important players in their own little patches, be they in Mpumalanga or KZN. And the NPA have shown, I think, commitment and independence by going for the likes of them.
How does society create a culture where, the last thing you want to do is be corrupt and commit crime? What happens? You go to other parts of the world and there are no fences, for example.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a question of carrots and sticks, as these things usually are. I think people who do wrong have to be punished, and people who do well have to be rewarded. And I don't even mean materially. We have to start treating whistleblowers like the heroes that they are. But I guess it's also really about societal behavior change. And that's a daunting thought. But we've done it successfully once before in the HIV/AIDS pandemic. And I think we need to think again about a campaign that is aimed at teaching people what the costs of corruption are, that aims at teaching people what the consequences maybe for them of corruption are. And above all, we need to have a leadership in the country that doesn't set the kind of example that was set, certainly during the Zuma years, and I'm afraid is still being set by prominent leaders, both within the governing party and in the state. I mean, I think that's really, really important.
Is this something that can be taught in schools, actually? We teach governance now to adults, and I just wonder, because it starts with small things. You give 10 rand to a traffic officer, And this is how corruption manifests.
Absolutely, I think it can be taught in schools. Civic duties can be taught in schools and should be, and I think to some extent are taught in schools. So too can it be taught to university accountancy students and law students and medical students. I mean, the lawyers and the accountants are very often they are critical facilitators of corruption. They need also to learn not only how to advise their clients on avoiding taxes, but how to advise their clients on avoiding prison. And they should fear the same consequences themselves that if they don't. So they too need to learn ethics. And a lot of this is about ethics, which is very often missed. I mean, government particularly have learned this mantra. The one thing they know about the rule of law is that you're innocent until you're proven guilty. Well, you don't have to be guilty of a crime in order to be disqualified from public office. You can just be unethical. Yeah. You can just not care about those you serve and those you work with. And that should come to the fore more than, or in addition to the criminal stuff, which of course must be punished through the criminal justice system.
So a lot of the corruption that we see and that often gets reported is public sector corruption. And I just wonder, the private sector must play a part. How is it that the private sector can be selectively, behave selectively? I mean, we've got global businesses that behave in the UK and they come here, they misbehave badly.
Yeah, I mean, some of them misbehave badly everywhere. I mean, a company like McKinsey doesn't really discriminate between where it misbehaves. It will do whatever it can get away with. And, a lot of these advisory firms, and I'm afraid increasingly the accountancy firms are demonstrating that. But so are some of the big producers. I doubt that a company like SAP, the big German software company, would behave corruptly in its home country because it fears the consequences, both the social consequences as well as the criminal consequences, as it were. Here they come here, somebody persuades them that this is the way to do business in South Africa, and out of the window go all their principles and compliance programs. And a number of firms have been found wanting on that front, both South African multinationals who also wouldn't behave like this if they were investing in Denmark, but seem to think it's okay if they invested, if they're active in their own country. And the answer simply is because they can, It's a very low-risk business getting involved in corruption.
Perhaps to wrap up, António Guterres has said that everyone, everywhere, must do their bit. What can ordinary citizens do to help in the fight against corruption?
They can report corruption where they see it, and they can remain outraged. Our entire objective and our model is to keep going a public conversation about corruption. And I feel really that we, not alone, the media, obviously hugely involved in that, have succeeded in doing that in South Africa. I mean, there are countries in the world, look at what happened to Russia today with sports and the doping, for whom corruption is an absolute established fact of life. And you either factor it in as a tax or you keep your head down and hope you can avoid the worst of it. South Africans are sort of pretty bolshy lot, and I think have not accepted that, and they can't accept that, and that's really what I think the public can do. They can just not accept it, and they cannot accept it at the ballot box. They cannot accept it wherever they're given opportunity to do so, and that's really the most important ingredient in fighting corruption.
All right. David Lewis, always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much indeed
Peter.
for joining us. All right, let's go to East